Hello, David Clarke here from DaVinci Training, and in this video I'm going to give you 8 quick tips on editing using DaVinci Resolve. I did do a whole course about getting started with it. Obviously click on the link in the description below if you want to see that. But here are just some small things that I've found out through use of Resolve which I wanted to pass on. These are all things that as I was editing I thought, why can't I do this? I can do this in other programs. Why can't I do that in Resolve? Or I know I could do this, but why can't I find it? The first one is I've got 3 clips here on the timeline and I want to move them around. I want that one in front of this one, or maybe I want that one behind that one. I'm used to, in my other editing program that I use a lot, which is Edius, I'm used to be able to just shove this into insert mode and pick stuff up and move it around. But that doesn't work in Resolve. You've got ripple mode, but if I start to move this around, it doesn't actually pick it up and move it around. So how do you do that? Before I notice this one, I would actually be picking the stuff up, moving it out of the way, moving that one along, moving that down. Generally, that was a pain in the posterior. But there's a nice little keyboard shortcut to move stuff left, right, and center. So suppose I want to move that to the front. What I've got to do is just hold down on Control and then Shift. And then to move it forward, I'm going to use the comma key, which has also got a sort of arrow on it pointing to the left. If you do that, it swaps the two around. Use the full stop, swaps them around again. So basically it takes that clip and moves it backwards and forwards on the timeline, which is a lot quicker than what I was doing before. Another thing that was irritating me was copying and pasting clips. So here I am on another timeline. I'm going to take that clip and I'm going to copy it. Then I'm going to go back to my first timeline and I'm going to paste it. Now I want to paste it on top. So obviously add another track in, add another audio track in. Yep, I want to paste it there, please. So you go paste and bosh, it does not go there. Of course, it goes onto the track, which it was on in the first place. How do you make that go onto a specific track? So I'm just going to undo that. It's all to do with these things, these auto track selectors, which basically I would leave on pretty much all of the time. But in this case, I actually want to turn them off. If I turn off that one and turn off that one and now paste it, it goes onto the track above. If you've got 5 or 6 tracks, so let's add a few more in. And say I wanted to go on to track 4, make sure all the ones underneath it are not selected and then paste, and it goes on to track 4. Audio, of course, is still going there. If I have track 3 set, well then it goes on to track 3. It always goes on to the lowest one of these, which is actually selected. But that to me was really annoying because I was forever having to paste it somewhere completely off the timeline and then move it down. Well, now I can make sure it goes in the right place. While I'm talking about pasting, another thing is if I do copy a clip and I want to put it onto the timeline there, I want everything to move out the way, but then what you have to do is once you've copied the clip, go up to Edit and then say Paste Insert or Control Shift and V. And then it'll put it in and move everything out the way. Now here it's made a right mess of the timeline because of course I didn't select that thing again, so it didn't move that audio and it's put them out of sync, which is why you want to leave these things on all the time to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen. But now, go and get that clip, copy it, go back to the first line and do a paste insert and it puts it in and moves everything out the way. On the playing front, when I'm editing, generally I just press the play button and obviously it just plays the clip. But there are times when I thought, wouldn't it be nice if it just jumps back a bit and plays? Yep, you can do that. You just have to press the slash key. So this is the one which is in the bottom right hand corner next to the shift key. Click on that, it jumps back a bit and plays stuff. So like if the cursor's at that join, I want to see just before the join. Click, plays just before the join and then carries on. There's also another thing under the stop button here, which I do use, not very often. I tend to use it when I'm trying to sync up different soundtracks on the timeline. If you right click on the stop button, you can see this stop and go to last position. So stop obviously normally just stops, the playhead stays where it was. But if you have this ticked, what happens is you play something, and then when you press the stop button, it jumps back to where you started. Now you might select that by default and actually get very irritated because why the hell is the playhead jumping around and not stopping where you tell it to? So obviously it's not the default. Normally you just want it to start and stop where you press the play button. But I do use that if I'm trying to sync up some sound because I'll put one clip on top of another. I'll play it, and if it's not quite right, it jumps back to where I started, and I can shuffle one of the clips and then play it again from exactly the place where I started. Whereas if I didn't have that as an option, it ends up going off down the timeline and maybe going away from the bit that I'm trying to sync up. So I like that, just make sure it's not selected all the time. That wasn't one of my 8 tips, just thought I'd mention it there when I was talking about playing. Another one is to do with stereo audio tracks. So let's have a look at the attributes on these clips. These clips have got stereo audio, but I can only see one waveform. Why is that? As a default, basically Resolve just mixes everything together and only shows you one waveform. If you want to see 2 waveforms, all you've got to do is right click on the clip and say display individual audio channels. And now you can see 2 waveforms. Great. In fact, there you can see I've got lots of sound on one side and not a lot of sound on the other. Now you might say, yeah, that's pretty obvious. You'd think if you're looking for something on a clip, you would just right click and it would be on a menu. Yeah, I know that does sound obvious, but actually I find myself scratching my hand one day thinking, I know you could do it somehow. How on earth could you do it? I had some clips on the timeline. I wasn't actually sure whether they were stereo or mono. If I turn this into a mono clip, so I'm going to just say mono, 1 channel. I wasn't sure whether I had that set for stereo or mono. It's a stereo clip, but I've chosen just to play 1 channel, but I couldn't tell. And there are certain ways, like if I'd set this up to be a mono track, even though that's only using 1 channel, so only like using the left channel, it'll still play over both sides of the speaker. But I wasn't entirely sure what bit I was using or whether the other channel looked better or something. So I thought, well, why don't I just show 2 waveforms? Why don't I show my stereo waveform, then I can tell, can't I? And I went and right clicked on it and I could not find it for toffee. I know it was there, I said to myself. I looked in the manual, I looked on YouTube. Where is it? Where is it? Because that command disappears if you're on a mono clip. If I change that back to a stereo clip, that command's back again. But that was one thing that left me scratching my head once, because where was it? I knew it was there and I couldn't see it, yet it wasn't there because it wasn't a stereo clip. Another one a bit like that came up when I was doing a bit of editing on the timeline. I was slightly zoomed in, so you know I've got lots of things. And I wanted to use timeline scrolling. So this is where, if you're used to Premiere, you can set it up so the playhead's stuck in the middle of the timeline and it stays there and everything moves behind it. So your playhead's always here and this just keeps the timeline up. It scrolls the timelines along. Rather than what Resolve does, which is it carries on playing, then it gets to the end, and it jumps to the next bit. And I knew that Resolve did timeline scrolling, but again, how do I enable it? Looking around here, okay, there's loads and loads of different options. Maybe it's under view. Oh, timeline scrolling. What? Why is it grayed out? Why is it not there? It's not there because actually Resolve doesn't do timeline scrolling in this page, but it will do timeline scrolling in the Fairlight page. Okay, let's zoom in a bit. Got your waveform there. Come up to View, timeline scrolling, fixed, and now the playhead stays in the middle and everything moves behind it. Which is something that, say, if you're used to Premiere, that actually happens in the edit page, but it doesn't in Resolve. So is that a tip? Well, it's a tip that if you see timeline scrolling and it's not working and you can't enable it for the page and you're looking around like I did, looking through manuals, looking through YouTube videos, trying to find out how to enable it, that's what it is. It doesn't actually work unless you're in the Fairlight page. Another little tip, because I often work on a laptop and a desktop, and sometimes I've got 2 screens and sometimes I've got 3 screens. And I was doing a little thing inside of Fusion. Now, Fusion here looks perfectly fine, but I came into this and the node area here was right up the top. There was no display windows whatsoever, and I couldn't find half of the stuff. And I wondered what the devil was going on. What was going on was that I had previously used this project in a system with 2 screens, and I'd set up Resolve to be using the 2 screens, using all this stuff up the top. Then when I'd gone to a single screen thing, it didn't reset all this so it was viewable on a single screen. It was a complete mess. And I was wondering what to do next. If you ever get that, so the window's in a mess, come up to Workspace and just do this thing. Reset UI layout. Puts everything back to the normal settings. Number of times I've done that when going from one system to another, and I've had to do that because the monitors are different. Very simple. As long as you can get to that, you can reset it and you'll be back and working. Without that, you're really up the creek because Resolve's windows are peculiar. They're not a bunch of floating windows. I can't just pick them up and move them around. So if they're in a complete mess, it's very difficult to try and get back to normal, But that's the answer. Reset UI layout, job done. Another thing was to do with this timecode thing up here. You put a clip in here and you want to move around it. Obviously you can drag around here, but you can click on this and put some numbers in. So suppose I want to go ahead 2 seconds. I can click on that and go +200, enter, and it jumps me forward 2 seconds. Or if I want to go to a specific time code like 4:15, enter 4:15 and it jumps to 4:15. And I actually use that quite a lot in different programs. Specifically, if I'm going from one program to another and I know I need to get to a part in the clip and I know what the time code is for that clip, I want to be able to put that number in and jump to it. But the only way I can access this is by clicking on those numbers and then typing. I mean, if I'm here and I go +200, it puts the plus in and the 2 and jumps. If I press plus, it automatically opens up that box. But what if I want to go to a specific place? So in this clip, I'm like 6 seconds and 15 frames in. Maybe I want to go to 2 seconds and 10 frames. Well, am I going to have to work out in my head like -405 and I'll get to the right place, but I'm doing maths in my head? Or, I could just click on it with a mouse and then start typing. But I didn't want to do the clicking on the mouse bit. I wanted to just go to this time code by pressing the keyboard, which is what I do in Premiere and in Edius. I just bang the numbers in and it does it. In Resolve, you can do that by pressing equals first. So, you've just clicked on the clip, you want to go to a specific point in that clip, you go equals 210. I'd like it if I didn't have to bother to press equals just like in other programs, but at least I can do that now without having to drag my mouse all the way up there and click. Believe me, if you do it a lot, that's flipping annoying. So equals, just remember, click equals and then you can do something. Click minus and you can go backwards, click plus and then you can go forwards, but go to a specific point, click equals, put in something and it goes to that point. Now my last quick tip here is to do with the list of timelines. Now this is only a problem if you've got a big complicated project with loads of timelines. So for example, I have got in this project 70 or 80 timelines and I want to be able to jump between them. Obviously I've got my timeline smart bin set up here, which you'll get if you in the preferences go to user and then say smart bin for timelines, and it'll give you a bin with all your timelines in it. But I wanted things to appear up here. But it only ever shows me the last 10 timelines up here. I wanted to see more timelines. Rather than having to come over here, I just wanted to click on that. And I wondered why. Why is it only showing me 10 timelines? If I come up to the preferences and then UI settings and go to this thing, timeline sort order, you can see you've got different options. Now recently used is showing me the ones I've most recently used, surprisingly. Let's choose one of the others. Let's go by creation date or alphabetic. So alphabetic was what I really wanted. I wanted them to all be in number order. Click on that. Oh, suddenly I've got a huge list and they're all in numerical order. So big that it goes off the screen. The only way to get to the bottom is to use the scrolly wheel mouse to move up and down. And I knew that I could see lots more than 10 timelines. But again, it's one of those things. Why can I only see 10? That's because that's what it does if you choose recently used. Recently used will only show you 10 timelines. The other two, creation date and alphabetic, will show you all your timelines. But recently used just shows you 10. Again, it was one of those things I just spent ages looking around trying to find out why on earth I couldn't see lots of timelines when I knew I had before. That's why. Recently used is probably the most sensible because you're probably going to want to go back to timelines you've been working on recently as opposed to ones you might have worked on 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I wanted to see more and they weren't there, so I had to keep coming over to my smart bin and then finding the list of things in here. That was why, because of the timeline sort order. Anyway, that's a quick list of some small things that I thought you might find useful about Resolve. If you want to know more about video editing, then visit my website www.dvctraining.co.uk. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more videos, and I'll see you next time.